Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Psychedelic Crank YouTube channel. Now, today we're going to go over my 2.6 gram trip report. Almost the complete opposite effect of what happened when I was on 2 grams. So if you remember from watching the first video in this channel, the 2 grams caused me to become all nature, lovey, and peace, and all that kind of stereotypical stuff, right? This one was different. I think I'm just gonna call it I'm an asshole. The substance was 2.6 grams of dried shroom capsules. The time of ingestion was 11 to 12 a.m. The trip sitter was my ex-girlfriend Laura and her friend Sandra. T plus 0 seconds, ingestion of capsules, and beginning of an hour-long drive to Sandra's house to pick her up. Around 20 minutes in, I ate a granola bar, and around 30 to 40 minutes, I decided to lay back and look at the car ceiling. I could see the beginning of a geometric pattern forming on it. The design was similar to a four-way intersection with buildings on each corner. It followed my vision around whenever I was looking at the car ceiling, so I guess it could be similar to what happens when you have little eye floaters, if you know what those are. Mild nausea began here, but I was unsure if it was related to the shrooms or my motion sickness. I don't usually do well with being a passenger in cars. For some reason, I tend to get motion sickness decently easily. At 1 hour in, we arrived at Sandra's house. I am laying down in the passenger seat, completely focused on the geometry that's on the ceiling. Rather than being confined to a small section of my vision, there were oranges and purples that were now spreading out all over the car ceiling. My sense of time at this point was dilated immensely, as I'd felt like I was on the road for much longer. It almost felt like we were on the road for a good 24 hours, and it had only been one, so that was weird to understand. So I used the time while we were at Sandra's house to get out of the car and stretch my legs, and this caused me to realize that I had a harder time with balance and motor functions. I was expecting this to happen anyway, so it didn't throw me off too much. Before getting back in the car, Laura asked me if I wanted to go observe some nature. We were about a half hour away from a local state park, not the same one from the 2 gram trip. This is a different one. At first I said no, but when we were about 5 minutes away from it, as we had to pass it on the way home, I said that I did want to go, not because I was feeling connected with nature in any way, but because I just wanted to see what it would be like on such a dosage. So on the ride there, I had my eyes closed a lot of the time, and I was just soaking in the visuals. There was one point where I had my eyes closed for probably only 5 minutes or so, but when I opened them and realized that I was surrounded by telephone poles and trees on the road, I was completely disoriented. I was so caught up in everything behind my eyes that I forgot I was even in a car. 1.5 hours, we arrive at the park and parked right next to a large open field. I spent a minute roughly staring at this field because the grass was much greener. The green was much brighter, much more vivid. Rather than wanting to walk around the campground area, I soon decided that I wanted to be in a more secluded area of the park so I wouldn't be seen by the public in my altered state. We took a short drive to another area, and this area had a few picnic tables and was right along the water with an observation pier at the end of a path. So, imagine going down and just, seeing the nature all around you on both sides. We must have been here for a total of 30 to 45 minutes. I didn't want Laura and Sandra to watch me as I explored the area. They walked around and looked on their own. At one point, I mentioned to them that I kept forgetting that they weren't seeing the world the way I did or experiencing the headspace. One tree had greens and purples coming off the bark. I followed behind them as they looked, mainly because I wasn't sure what else to do. Then comes the big part, the headspace. We went down the path leading to the observation pier. This short walk took about 5 minutes and had railings on both sides. Trying to explain the vibe I was getting, I used the imagery of being on an observation deck of a large spaceship looking out over an alien planet's plant life. I don't remember how this occurred or what led to it, but I underwent my first ever ego replacement experience. I went from normal, just looking at the world around me, to a completely separate sense of self. It was so weird to forget about my original being looking back on it, but at the time, these are the things that I was convinced of. 1, I was an immortal, incorporeal being. 2, my original place of existence was a transcendent, non-physical bliss with no aspects of humanity in it. Everything was perfect, even though I actually couldn't convey any particulars about it without just pulling shit out of the crack of my ass. 3, the feeling of being put on Earth was not a good thing, more of a punishment, that I couldn't experience the all-encompassing eternity that I resided in previously. 4, I was being punished by being shoved into what I referred to as a flesh prison for the span of however long the headspace lasted. Now, the park was still displaying visuals, but it all seemed perfectly normal to me, as if I'd seen it millions of times. I came to the justification that this is the way that spiritual beings like me saw the physical universe. I used an analogy, not the best one, to explain my feeling about the material world. The total of all existence, whether physical or not, was all under one umbrella, and I called that umbrella the Universal High School. I was one of the cool beings, like the type to wear a leather jacket and smoking in the hallways with my friends. The physical universe was the equivalent of an ant crawling across the floor. They weren't actively oppressed or destroyed, but just acknowledged and ignored. I was convinced that we, the incorporeal spirits such as the one possessing me, were far better and more superior than anything physical, and I felt a total indifference towards them. And these are a couple of quote highlights from the experience. So I said, "You humans are such losers." Laura said to me, she's like, "You're human too." And I'm like, "Don't fucking remind me." Laura said, "I love you." And I said, "I know somewhere deep down this human body loves you too." But I didn't care. I did not care about her, and I feel so bad. Speaking to Laura about this after the fact, she was hurt because she felt like I didn't love her at the time. I don't blame her for feeling like this, as I was just being a complete dick during this. Not just them, but towards humanity in general. After arriving back home at my house, which was probably around the 3 to 3.5 hour mark, I decided that I needed to get some food in my system. I had a few bites of leftover stroganoff noodles while Laura ended up going to bed because she had been up for over 24 hours at that point and was completely exhausted. Sandra and I ended up going for a walk around the neighborhood, and by this point, I was coming out of the headspace. I couldn't help but apologize to both of them profusely once the trip was over, and I began coming back into my normal headspace. During my walk with Sandra, I told her how I wish I could replay previous trips like I was replaying chapters of a DVD or a game. How the fact that they'll only remain as memories and I might never experience that level of certainty with that specific personality ever again kind of upset. That's what I was upset about, is the fact that I'll never be able to exactly relive these convictions, the certainty, like I said, of knowing that I was better than the physical universe. But I think each dose at 2.5 grams or higher might end up probably being a random spin on the personality wheel, and that's kind of what's worrying me before I do my next trip, is what kind of personality am I going to get? If it ends up being ego replacement, it might not. The rest of the come down was spent watching some episodes of Impractical Jokers with Sandra before I was then well enough to bring her home. That is the 2.6 gram experience. I know it took me forever to actually put this out. I had it recorded, written down, and all that stuff, but I just did not have the time to actually narrate it. At the time, this was one of my favorite trips of all time. Out of the very few that I've had, I think that this one, that's tough though. If I was to rank the 2 gram trip versus the 2.6, I would say that I liked the 2 gram because of the joy, because of the euphoria. In this 2.6, I felt no euphoria, but with this experience that I'm just reading, I like the conviction, the certainty, the feeling of knowing exactly what I am, or what I thought I was. I want to thank you guys all for listening. Hopefully I should be having an interview with somebody relatively soon. And I guess the usual stuff. Like, comment, subscribe if you want to see more content whenever it comes out. I know this isn't going to be consistent, but more of just a whenever I put things out. So, later, guys.